And now it's time to consider the path of your feet, for crying out loud. She is one of the leading voices in the anti-movement. Her whole bit is to be snarky and to talk about the church. And so that's kind of how she makes her living. All of this is her marketing material. So let's dive in and talk about what she's going to say.
Here is a list of all of the things that Mormon men can do in the church that Mormon women cannot. Mormon women cannot hold the priesthood, which excludes them from virtually all leadership positions. Women are never permitted to be leaders over men and only are permitted to be leaders over other women, girls, and very young children. This is a current chart of major Mormon leadership. There are 122 men and only 9 women. Women cannot bless their own babies. If their baby is sick, they need a man to step in order to bless the sick baby. When a baby is first born, women are not even permitted to stand inside of the circle where a baby receives a special baby blessing. Women are never permitted to manage or audit any of the church finances within the congregation or on a larger scale. Managing finances is always the role of a man. Women cannot pass the sacrament, they can't baptize anyone, including their own children, and they cannot perform any marriages.
Let's get some of your initial reactions, and then we'll talk a little bit more about it. So,
yeah,
what are your knee-jerk reactions after seeing that?
That's not all that women can't do in the church. They can't go and move families in and out of the ward. They can't shovel the snow.
How dare you?
they that's
yeah, like why stop there? Like, let's keep going. Let's get this party started. Taking down the chairs, taking down the tables and the chairs in the cultural hall, setting up the tables and the chairs, moving people in and out, roofing, landscaping, snow removal when you got snow.
Past offerings, is a deacon, or washing out all the trays or prepping sacrament, we
getting
do
to church
things
early, bringing the bread.
Yeah, there's a plethora of things that they also don't do that are not super fun. And not to say that all the things she listed off are like fun perks of being a man in the church.
Let's not forget the late night blessings, like the emergency blessings when like ministering families have a problem and they need you. It's like, okay, yeah, you got to go. I mean,
100%.
there is a lot. Overseeing and attending high adventure camps, that's another one.
Yeah, like that's
like you and I, we went on a 45-mile hike to Kings Peak. It's like, man, I don't know that most of the women that were around us at that time could even handle that. I could barely handle that.
Yeah, I just don't see the glowing allure of being able to sit in the clerk's office and count all the little pennies and coins that all the kids brought in for tithing, and make sure you get that deposited.
Yeah, so I think... Haven't you seen those women that hang around the clerk's office and their mouth is just watering and they're just like, oh, those spreadsheets, I got to get in those. I just wish I could handle the church audit. I've never seen a single woman in my entire church experience that looked at all of the financial reports and said, that's what I want to do. This is unfair that I cannot be in there. The men don't even want to be in there, for crying out loud, Yeah,
I just didn't know that was a thing. Like, women want to do that? Oh, okay. I mean, if I was president of the church, sure, go crunch some numbers, Like, I just don't think that's like I think that's one of those things that men have to be called to do or else it won't get done. Like, it's one of those things that it's a responsibility. It's not fun. I don't know who would think that's fun. I hate numbers. I hate finances when it comes to stuff like that. So
yeah,
that doesn't sound pleasant at all.
Yeah, I mean, tithing declaration, that's kind of tough as well because the bishop, he has to figure out if they've declared their tithing. He has to hunt them down. He has to get an appointment with them. A lot of times it's a face-to-face interview that he's doing. And a lot of times that takes a significant amount of time away from his family and away from other responsibilities and his work and stuff like that. There's something else that I wanted to point out, though. So if you noticed, she used some very sanitized language when she was describing things. And I wanted to point that out. So first of all, she referred to women as women, and she referred to men as men, instead of referring to women as mothers and men as fathers. So she was saying, women can't bless their own children. It's like, well, yeah, that's because the father is blessing his own child in that circle. It's a little malicious to paint this, because the way that she painted it was saying like, oh, a man is going to take your child away and this stranger is just going to get with a group of other strangers instead of your brothers, your uncles, your grandparents, your father. and bless your child and welcome them into a circle of strength, of priesthood holders that can help them and guide them and be a resource to them that they can lean on throughout their entire lives.
And I mean, I might have to look this up, but I'm pretty sure that if there's not a father in the home, that the mother has the choice of who she'd like to bless her baby.
Yeah, a lot of times
like,
that can be handed over to like grandparents. Like if the grandfather, if like father's not in the home, yeah, her dad can come, a grandparent can come, the bishop can do it if she needs a man. There are men that are able to do that, but it's ultimately if it's her child, she's going to have a say over who blesses her baby.
Yeah, to kind of take it out of the whole family dynamic of just, it's a woman and her baby and strangers blessing. No, I mean, it's another one of those milestones, especially for the father and for the mother, as parents of a new baby, to take part in that. Like, fathers need rites of passage, mothers need rites of passage. These things are important, right? You need to get that, especially in this day and age where fathers are not as involved as they should be, they need to be involved at every step of the way with that child's development.
Right.
That's all I hear from women usually is like, I wish my husband was more involved. Like I wish.
Yeah.
So
I totally get that. So I mean, the language that she uses though is pretty sinister, because the language of can't implies that there is a large, massive group of this majority of women that are lined up in ranks saying, I want to do these things, but I cannot. And in my experience, I don't think there are that many women that want to do those things in the church. In my experience, I mean, the church has a hard enough time getting volunteer men to fill those spots. But it brings up a really good question. And this is something that we're not the only ones that believe this way, but it's us. And I know of a handful of female Olympic boxers that now believe that men and women are very different, okay? And so I think it's important to call out that men and women are different. Men are more interested in things. Women are more interested in relationships and people. So with that kind of an understanding, let's get into a question. Why do men need the priesthood? That's a question that I think is worth a little bit of discussion. So What are some of your initial thoughts? Or if you want me to start, I could go ahead.
I think that there's like this huge like misconception, or even in the way she paints it, even is that it's about power. That there's some level of power that comes with these responsibilities, and to some degree, yes, only in the degree that you need, that you get the power you need to actually fulfill the responsibilities. Like outside of that, there's no like overarching huge power you get over any of the other members or anything like that. That's not actually how the church functions at all. There's no power dynamic there.
Yeah.
Like,
well, typically the greater calling that you have, the greater amount of time you're giving up, the greater amount of service you're engaging in, to the point where like, your prophets and apostles are literally giving their lives to the calling.
Yeah, I mean, they're spending 24/7. That would be exhausting.
I would want to be retired. I wouldn't want to do it. That's tough. And that's why they have to be called to it. It's like men will only do things out of necessity. Like if they're called to it, they'll do it. If no one else can do it, they will do it. And there are a couple studies out there that there are a handful of churches where they've let women become like female pastors and stuff like that. And it's interesting because they've noticed that in these congregations, the amount of men that attend the church has actually declined ever since females have become pastors and women have been given these leadership roles. And that's really interesting. I'm not sure I know why, but I think that's definitely something to pay attention to.
Yeah, there's a Joseph Smith quote somewhere in the ether that kind of hits on the point that men are just generally less spiritual than women. Like it's very deeper in us, I guess.
Well, if you think about the entire, like the birth process, there is so much going on when a woman gets pregnant and she has her child. Like they are literally sharing DNA. Stem cells from the baby are going into the mother to help repair her body. Like there is so much, and a woman, as soon as she holds her baby, they immediately establish the connection. There's the skin to skin. What's the man's job in all of that? to cut the cord, to separate that baby from the mother and say, "Ha ha, gotcha, welcome to the real world, kid." And that's kind of a microcosm of the different roles between men and women. I heard once that like women, their job is to help children to regulate their emotions and to learn how to do that. And they have like from the ages of 0 to 4 to do that, if I remember correctly. And then from 4 onwards, the men are supposed to step into their children's lives. So these fathers, their responsibility is to help the child to assimilate into society. So it's to help the child navigate the world and assimilate themselves as a productive, helpful member of your local community.
And a great way to keep your children more involved in church is to have the entire community expect your husband and their father show up at church and participate. Right?
Yeah.
That's what a calling is. It's like, hey, you are going to be here. We're all counting on you. Because that's really the only way to get a man to take care of something is if everybody is depending on him to do that, right?
Well, I think that's a very good point. And let's take it down to a family level. At a family level, would you rather have the mother with the priesthood, or would you rather have the father hold the priesthood on a family level? Because if the mother is already inclined to love, nurture, and care for her children, and the father is more inclined on things and providing and focusing on bringing in income and protecting his family and sheltering them and stuff like that, wouldn't you want the father figure in the household to have a connection with God that teaches him how to serve other people and how to put himself beneath the needs of those that he's serving, and to govern his household upon the principles of righteousness? I don't know of a single married woman with children who would rather take on the priesthood herself and say, you know what, my husband can do whatever he wants, get him away from the children. I tell you, women are constantly pulling their husbands into the family and saying like, hey, let's connect with the kids. You need to spend more time with the kids. I mean, I can't tell you how many movies were made in the 90s about these fathers that could not spend time with their kids because they were so focused on work. It was like pretty much every movie that we saw as kids was just like, oh yeah, it's like Jingle All the Way, all those Christmas movies that came out, it's just like you're spending too much time with the office and you're failing as a father. It's like the priesthood helps men to succeed as fathers.
Well, and and of course, men and women both have access to priesthood in the home. What's interesting, and I haven't fleshed this out, this just came into my head, so
we'll flip our ties over the shoulder on this one.
Yeah, exactly. But it's interesting that, with both the husband and wife having access to the priesthood, that there is the dichotomy of mercy and justice, which actually fall into the roles very well of mother and father, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like
when mom gets overwhelmed, who does she call for? It's always the husband that's just like, hey,
the hammer drops. Yeah.
And the husband gets out and he's like, hey, what's going on? And all the kids just run, just like, oh no, we really messed up because dad's coming. I mean, that's how it was when we were growing up.
Oh yeah, exactly. So you have your mother who is by nature nurturing you, right? There's that compassion, that mercy, and she is empowered through the priesthood in her home to do so. But you also need a judge in Israel. You also need a father who will make sure that justice is going to be exacted in the home. And I don't think that if you were to switch those roles, or if you were to give both roles to one person exclusively, you're going to have a bad time. That's not going to work out well. We've played that experiment out for the last few decades, and it's just not working well. So, yeah, I think that I think it's working the way it should, if you respect the process, right? I think it works really well.
The word itself, and that's a great call out. I think we should add that because there's going to be someone in the comments that calls this out. But women can utilize the priesthood in their lives, because just because women are not priesthood holders does not mean that they don't have access to priesthood power. So anytime that women are given a calling in the church, they utilize priesthood power to receive revelation and conduct that calling. So I think that's a very important call out to make. There are a lot of responsibilities that women are given. Relief Society, general presidencies, primary presidencies. Yeah, the women in those offices definitely are utilizing priesthood power to help them to conduct the affairs of the church at that level. So, and it goes all the way down into the family. So Like my wife has been able to receive revelation for our family, and I have as well. And I think that's both of us calling on priesthood power in order to help us with our family in our own sphere of influence. And that's the model that we're being taught.
And what better act of priesthood power than receiving a soul through the veil in the act of procreation? You know, that's exclusively a female right, you know, and a female responsibility, and that is underplayed a lot. I think, you know, that's just not completely understood, that there's priesthood power involved in receiving that soul, growing that body, that vessel inside of you, and giving birth to a child. Right?
Yeah.
That's a huge monumental thing that people just don't appreciate.
Deeply symbolic as well. I mean,
yeah,
women are considered literal veils. I mean, they serve as like almost a greeter. They bring the child through the veil from their premortal existence into mortality. That is the job of a mother. The mothers also are able to literally feed their children, and nourish them and nurture them. And it's interesting because I think she said that women are stuck with the kids or something along the lines like that. This ideology, I want to separate the ideology from the person. This ideology hates children. They view children as a net negative on society. This ideology wants women to break themselves on oil rigs, working shoulder to shoulder with men in the name of equality. It's disgusting, and that's gross, and it's inhumane. It's inhuman. It goes against our nature. And something else to understand is when we're talking about the priesthood, it is an inherently masculine thing. I mean, it's not called the priestesshood; it's called the priesthood. So that's inherently masculine. Also the name Melchizedek. So Melchizedek, that is a combination of two words. So the first part of that, so Melchi actually is Hebrew for king, and Zedek is actually the Hebrew for righteousness. And the righteousness, according to the Hebrew, means doing the right thing at the right time for the right reason. And so you put that together, and this is the authority and power of the righteous king. And that is what it trains men to do and to become, is a righteous king over their household. So it teaches men to become a king and a priest over the kingdom of their family. And so it helps them, and they have models through this all throughout the Bible, all throughout the Book of Mormon as well. Almost every major prophet in the Book of Mormon was a king and a priest. And so that's where men are able to see how they're supposed to conduct themselves and how they're supposed to conduct their households as well. But I mean, it's not only there. Let's go with pop culture. If there's one piece of canon that's outside of Scripture that I think most people will understand, Lord of the Rings. Okay?
There you go. Mm-hmm.
Let's look at Aragorn, because I think he serves as like an archetypal king figure. And so Aragorn is the archetypal king. There's this line in J.R.R. Tolkien's book that says, "The hands of the king are the hands of healer, and so shall the rightful king be known." So the rightful king was to be known as someone who could actually heal. And so after the battle of, I think it was Minas Tirith, there were so many wounded, and Aragorn immediately tended to the wounded and immediately began to heal all of his friends and everyone else who had served in battle. His role, there's this great YouTube video that kind of describes how Aragorn reflects authentic masculinity. And I think it's actually really beneficial if you think about the priesthood and what it does and what it teaches men to do as you watch that video. I'll put a link to it in the description. But there are some points that it brings out that are worthy to call out. So let's see. Aragorn didn't seek out power and authority over other people. Necessity called him into it, and he rose to the call, but viewed it as a greater call to serve and help others, leading them on the front lines into battles versus being locked behind the guards on the throne of Gondor like the steward. So there's that contrasting there. So this gal is framing men in the church to be like the steward of Gondor, who everyone is serving the steward. They're singing to him while he's like massacring these like grape tomatoes or whatever. You know? From my experience, the priesthood teaches men to be more like Aragorn, where he loved his duty more than he loved the call. He did not become a king first. He became a healer, he became a warrior first, and then he became a king after he relentlessly pursued his duty. So he put his duty above everything, and that's why he was always on the front lines of every single battle. He was helping out any way that he could. He repeatedly said, "I'll give my life, if I can help you. If I can just help this cause, I will give my life to do it." And that is what the Melchizedek priesthood does for men. It gives them something to do. It gives them a fight. It gives them a journey. And it gives them a battle to fight, and if you take that away from men and say, we don't need you, then, like, if you take away all of that, then what are they going to do? What happens when you have a king who is not a priest? I mean, we have the wicked king Noah as a good example of that. Like, he just kind of pursues his desires willy-nilly. Like, he's a wicked king. He lays heavy taxes. He becomes a huge detriment to his people because he doesn't prepare them against battle, and he's not keeping covenants, so they don't have God's protection over their country anymore.
Back to your point on Aragorn, where I'm actually reading the books with my kids right now, so this is good timing. One thing that I didn't pick up on the first time I read the books is how humbled and how uncertain he can be sometimes about his role as Isildur's heir, right? Like, his bloodline, this power that's been passed to him through his ancestors, is a power that he's not always certain to wield, and he's always very careful when he does wield it, right? He's constantly trying to live up to this power that he's been given by being, Isildur's heir. So I mean, that tracks right along with the priesthood. It's this power that's given to you. It has a chain all the way back, right? And you're constantly, if you respect it, if you understand it, you're constantly humbled by it, and you're constantly trying to live up to it.
Right.
Those
and humility isn't.
Respect it.
I think it was C.S. Lewis that said humility isn't thinking less of yourself; it's thinking of yourself less. And so I think that's what Aragorn really embodies in a great way. Is like, he put himself at the very bottom of the list. He always was putting his duty first. The other thing, really cool call out before we wrap up, he was able to go into the mountains and to call down an undead army to help save his people and his household from dying in a miraculous way. I mean, think about the symbolism of all of that. I mean, with temples, mountains, undead, ancestors, people on the other side of the veil. I mean, it's ringing bells for me. I don't know. It might not be ringing bells for you. Maybe it's like Polar Express where you just can't hear the magic anymore. But for me, those bells are ringing loud and clear.
What really happens there is that he calls upon a covenant that was made, right? And he uses that covenant to summon power for him in his righteous cause, right? So, I mean, like, it's very interesting. Yeah, it's Tolkien. I mean, he's so close. Someone do his baptismal work for him in the temple, Oh,
I'm sure it's already been done. Yeah, hands down. There are some other things that I wanted to touch down on. There's a piece in Isaiah that talks about, like, the breakdown of traditional family roles. It specifically calls out, like, when women rule over thee and children become thy oppressors, which is a signal of weak men and weak leadership at large. And it talks about how this is when the daughters of Zion become chastised. And it talks about, everyone knows this, about, like, the tinkling in the feet and the hair being turned into a scab, and instead of sweet smells, there will be burning. And all of those things, like the scab on the head, all of those negative consequences were actually things that were done to people who were taken slaves by opposing armies. And so an opposing army would shave your head. They would make you wear sackcloth, which is coarse and rugged material. They would also brand you. And so instead of the sweet smell, you would have the smell of burning flesh. And so a lot of it has this idea of, if you have that breakdown of traditional family roles, it leads to a weak country. When you have a weak country, that country no longer has the covenantal promises that were given to them. So one of the covenantal promises that was given to ancient Israel was the idea of military invulnerability. And so when the breakdown of the family happens writ large, guess what? They lose that access to that covenantal power that keeps them from being destroyed by their enemies. And this is what you saw with the Nephites as well. So in the end of the Book of Mormon, the Nephites were completely destroyed because they no longer had access to that covenantal power that continually and miraculously helped them to ward off the Lamanites throughout the entire Book of Mormon. So it was when they no longer had that power, they're left to their own strength, they got wiped out.
And I think to that point, God kind of operates that way. Is like, he's more holding the tides of evil at bay for you rather than unleashing a punishment upon you. He's not like, I'm going to smite you if you don't do, you don't hold up your end of the deal. It's more like, all right, I got to go because you're not respecting me. So here comes the flood that I was holding back for you.
I was trying to help you, but you told me you don't want it. So, okay, here you go.
good luck. This is the evils of the world, and they're just going to take you out. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's fascinating.
There was a study that we mentioned a while back that said 93% of the family will follow the father in matters of faith. And that's really fascinating. And I've been thinking about it for a long time. One of the ideas I had was that men by nature are more interested in things, and the priesthood helps them to become more interested in people and in relationships. It helps them to become people oriented. And so I think when children see their fathers becoming people oriented, they see a change in the nature of their father that they would not see with their mother. So the mother is already people oriented. The mother already serves of other people and is always thinking about other people. I tell you what, my wife, one time, she got lost on a plane. Not in an airport, but on an airplane, okay? She could not remember where we were sitting, but the really funny thing is that she remembers everybody's names and birthdays. And she will constantly, she's like one of the first people in the family chat to say like, oh, happy birthday to this person or this niece or that nephew or whatever. And I'm like, how do you remember all of that? But that's just how I think women are naturally focused on, is that they are naturally focused on relationships. The priesthood helps men to cut against their nature. And I think children can see that. I think that's why children, and not just the priesthood, but conversion at any point, like if you are converted, if they see their father choosing Christianity instead of just staying at home, watching football or doing whatever, they're going to see a man cutting against his own nature for the benefit of his family, which kind of falls in line of the King of Righteousness. Anyway, but those 100%. Are some of my final thoughts on this. For those reasons, we asked this lady to consider the path of her feet. I mean, it leads to an ugly place. You know, it leads to unhappy families. It leads to bad places, destroyed countries. I don't want to be too hyperbolic, but I guess I will.